morning, everybody. I'm Amanda Peterson, news editor at MD+DI, and this is Medtech Unfiltered. And last week, we published our annual salary survey, the results of the survey, I should say. We'd been running the survey itself for quite some time and gathered as much data as we possibly could. And then last week, we published the results. It's always one of our most popular features every year. It's always exciting to kind of get a snapshot of the industry. It's completely anonymous, of course, and the results are aggregated in a way that there's no possibility of anybody being identified by their answers. So anyway, it's always really interesting to see where the industry is at. We look at a lot of different variables for the survey, and I want to focus this conversation on the gender variables that we looked at. And honestly, I didn't set out to talk about. I wanted to talk about the salary survey, and just full disclosure, I was really looking for other trends. I thought there might be other trends given COVID-19. I thought that we might see some changes in the job satisfaction rate, for instance, because that's something that we always ask about. But I looked back through 5 years worth of these survey results now, and the job satisfaction rate was really pretty steady. So COVID-19 didn't seem to affect that much. Another factor I looked at was number of hours in a work week. I know that there's at some companies, especially companies that were heavily involved with making COVID-19 diagnostics, some of those engineers and R&D folks really pulled some crazy hours and practically just set up camp at their labs to make these tests as quickly as possible. So I kind of expected to see some changes regarding the number of hours in an average work week due to COVID, but that really didn't change according to our survey. That was pretty steady. So I looked at a bunch of different factors and I compared the results. Again, I went back for every variable that we analyzed. I went back and looked at the past 5 years surveys that we've published. And what I did notice a difference in was some of the gender variables. And I thought it was really interesting. What stuck out to me specifically is that first, I looked at the gender ratio, the ratio of men in the industry versus women. And back in 2016, the ratio was 4-to-1, 4 men in the industry for every 1 woman. So that's fairly wide. That ratio has improved. The proportion has improved dramatically in the past 5 years, actually. Right now it's closer to 2-to-1. It's just a little, I want to say 2.3 maybe to 1, something like that, but it's really close to 2-to-1 now. So the proportion, the number of women in the industry has greatly improved. But as that has happened, the pay gap between men and women has widened dramatically. I want to say more than $40,000 by more than $40,000 a year, close to $50,000, I believe. I'd have to go back and check the data specifically. I don't have it on my little home teleprompter here, but anyway. Suffices to say, I was kind of surprised. Maybe that's naive of me, but economics and specifically gender economics is really not my area of expertise. I write about medtech. I've been writing about medtech for the past, what is it now, like 12 or 13 years, something like that. So my expertise is pretty deep in the industry itself, but when it comes to analyzing the proportion of men and women in the industry, that's really kind of out of my field. So I reached out to some experts who do extensively study gender economics. I actually reached out to about a dozen of them, and I thought maybe one or two would get back to me, but actually I was really surprised. It's a pretty hot topic, especially if this happens to be the area that they focus on. So mostly these were academic researchers. And really, I think all of them got back to me pretty quickly. So some needed more information, wanted to kind of pick apart the data a little bit more. But there were some theories that came up. And again, without really taking a much harder look at the data, these are just theories. But some interesting theories, a lot of the folks said it's likely that more of the women in the industry represent more entry-level positions, especially since we have seen that ratio change so much over the 5 years, that it's likely that that the entry-level positions are more women dominated, or there's just more women in those entry-level positions, and that could explain some of the gender gap. However, I really think there's more to it than that. That's just what my gut tells me. What I did find was some of the other theories that the researchers brought to my attention that was interesting. They said one said as a job becomes more, or I should say less desirable, more doors open to women. I don't think that's the case in this industry, especially because I did look at the job satisfaction, and that doesn't seem to have changed. I think in general, the job satisfaction in medtech is pretty high. Most people are driven by the fact that they're doing something, they're making something or contributing to a product that is going to greatly improve, if not save lives. So there's a lot of job satisfaction in the industry. I don't think that that's really what's going on here. Another researcher mentioned that as the proportion of women increases, some men tend to exit for one reason or another. And then also the fact that employers know that they can hire women to fill those roles for less, that women will work for less than men, generally speaking. This particular researcher called this strategic discrimination, and she said, it's not that employers don't want women to work for them. Quite the opposite. There's a lot of value. There's been a lot of studies that show the business value to hiring women and to promoting women, in fact. But at the same time, companies are always concerned about the bottom line. And if they know that they can get women in the door for cheaper, then that's probably what they're going to do. So that was interesting. The same researcher also said that as women enter, it creates a downward pressure on the wages of men even, and that's part of why more men start to leave. Especially, she said this mostly affects the men in the lower level positions or the lower paid men, because they will go out and look for a better paying job in the industry versus the men who have already climbed the ladder and are in a higher paying position. They'll stay on, and of course they're already making those higher wages, so that's what creates what she said a selection effect, which is a wider pay gap between those women that are coming through the door and the men in the higher level positions. So again, there's a lot of factors at play, and a lot of people that I reached out to pointed out that there could be differences in education level, although I'm not sure that would be the case in this industry. Experience level, I could definitely see that maybe more of the women taking our survey this year as opposed to previous years might be just starting out in the industry, so that could be. Now looking at the salary for management level positions, because we did break it out, the numbers that I gave you are kind of an overall, like everybody that took the survey that was qualified, because we don't just include everybody that takes the survey. These the data is vetted pretty thoroughly to make sure that these are in fact people working in the industry, in medical device and diagnostic industry. In order to be qualified, they have to be working for a company that makes either a medical device or a medical diagnostic. So automatically, a lot of the responses that we get are not usable because they don't meet that qualification. We really want to make sure that we're just looking at the industry and comparing apples to apples as much as possible. So a lot of interesting data, and I'll be sure to share the link in the comments section so that you can see the data for yourself. And I'm sure we'll be writing more about this and probably providing some additional analysis based on the survey results in the weeks to come. And I'll be sure to make sure that we share that out through our Facebook page. And of course, you can always go to www.mddionline.com. That's where you can see all of the stories that we write and all of the content that we produce. So, with that, I will be looking more into it, and yes, it was intentional that I wore my Wonder Woman shirt today, and if you can't read it says, nevertheless, she persisted, so I just thought that was appropriate attire today, a little bit more business casual than I've been going lately, but thought that since we were talking about gender gaps and gender ratios in the industry, that this would be appropriate. Anyway, that's just my thoughts. Again, I really didn't want to get on any kind of a soapbox with this one. I really wanted to look at some other trends from the survey and how COVID-19 might have impacted the survey results, but I surprisingly didn't really see anything. I'll be looking at it closer. Maybe something will jump out at me and I can share that next week, but really the gender thing was what was the most glaring difference to me when I compared it to the last 5 years. So with that, I hope you all have a great week, and we'll see you next week on Medtech Unfiltered.